What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson. The New York Rangers are still coachless, no head coach since they amicably decided to part ways with head coach Gerard Gallant. Now, the Rangers on the search for a head coach. There's a bunch of candidates out there. We did a breakdown on the top 3 candidates that we've identified on the channel. Go check that out. It's the latest video. But today, we want to talk about one specific coaching candidate that we have not yet discussed, and that is Kris Knoblauch, now head coach of the Hartford Wolfpack, handpicked by Chris Drury to coach the Wolfpack. This is a guy who could potentially be a top candidate for the New York Rangers. So we're going to go ahead, dive into him, what he brings potentially as the head coach and candidate, and of course, all of that good stuff. But before we do, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel. If you are new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. But without further ado, Eric, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on Kris Knoblauch?
I'm doing good overall. Despite the Rangers being eliminated from the playoffs, pretty much the rest of the playoffs has gone every way I would have wanted to. Last night, New Jersey got eliminated. Shout out former Ranger Jesper Fast for making that happen in overtime last night. He came through for the boys one last time. But overall, the whole coaching thing, this is one of those things that it's probably going to take a while. You longtime viewers will probably remember last offseason when we just talked for weeks and weeks and weeks about who's going to be the second line center to replace Ryan Strome. We ended up being Vincent Trocheck, but that was a long, strenuous process. And I envision the same thing is going to happen for this open head coaching position, where it's one of those rare opportunities where the Rangers can really just change up the whole style of the team and just make it exactly how we want to be if we find the right guy. And in order to find the right guy, it's going to be a long, stressful process of just making a list and narrowing it down. But Kris Knoblauch, he has very little NHL experience. He coached 6 games with the Rangers back in the day when our coaches were out with COVID for a little bit. But, in those 6 games, we went 4-2. One of those included a 9-0 win over Philadelphia. So he has shown promise. And, outside of that little stint in the NHL with the Rangers, he's been pretty successful with the Hartford Wolfpack as well. He was an assistant coach with the Flyers for 2 seasons just before we hired him. So he has a lot of potential that he brings to the table. So you can just dive right in onto that.
Yeah, let's dive right in and let's dive into what the beat writers are saying about Knoblauch and his potential to become the New York Rangers head coach. Here's a quote from Vince. Let me get his last name right. Mercoliano, Vince Mercoliano. He is one of the writers covering the Rangers, and he said, among the candidates with no NHL head coaching experience, many believe Kris Knoblauch may have the best chance. He was handpicked by Drury to coach in Hartford, which is currently on a nice run in the AHL playoffs. Wouldn't call him the favorite, but he's in the discussion. So essentially, what Vince is saying there is that of the guys who don't have head coaching experience in the NHL, Knoblauch is in front of that whole pack. But in terms of him versus some of these other guys who do have head coaching experience, not necessarily the favorite in total, but definitely a strong candidate. Now, another quote here is, I think there's a lot of curiosity right now surrounding Kris Knoblauch. This is a guy who the impression has been that the New York Rangers picked him because they wanted to groom him, that they believed he had the potential to be an NHL head coach. End quote there. And again, we did see a little bit of his potential, as Eric just mentioned, in 2021 when he went 4-2 for 6 games as the interim head coach of the New York Rangers, while David Quinn and his staff were placed on the COVID-19 protocol list, including the 9-0 win over the Flyers. So we've seen his coaching chops in the AHL. We've seen a glimpse of it in the NHL, but again, not a ton of experience here, in my opinion. This is your boom or bust pick. This is, your out of the box hiring, a young guy here with very little experience. Not sure how well that would gel with the New York Rangers, who have a lot of veterans, a very older team. Some of these guys are nearing in age to Kris Knoblauch, who's only 44 years old. So, when you take a look at Yaroslav Halak, 37 versus 44, not that far off there. So this is a young head coach, not one of those other guys that we discussed, like Laviolette and some of the others we discussed in the last episode. But with Knoblauch, I do think that this is a guy who has great potential, but I don't know how well that potential would translate immediately, considering he doesn't have any NHL coaching experience, head coaching experience full time. Now, if you do look at the Wolfpack, though, They are in the postseason. They did just lose their most recent game to the Hershey Bears, a 3-2 loss in overtime. But over the Providence Bruins, they went 6-3 for a win the first game, and then 4-0 win the second game. But right now, they are in the middle of a series with the Hershey Bears. They are coming off of a really solid and successful 2022 season. And as we know, we have some Rangers prospects down on there with being coached by Knoblauch, so that familiarity might also be important. But Eric, the main thing that I want to hit on is the lack of experience, because that's obviously the biggest hurdle for Knoblauch to jump, right? He doesn't really have much experience at the NHL level, a few stints here and there as an assistant. He did coach for the Philadelphia Flyers as an assistant at one point. And then again, he was assistant on the New York Rangers as the interim head coach when everyone was out with COVID. But overall, no head coaching experience. Do you think that would take him right off the list for you personally? Like when you're looking at the list of candidates, Mike Sullivan, Laviolette, some other guys out there, would you just take Knoblauch off of your list because of the lack of head coaching experience? Or is this something that you would be interested in, taking a chance on a guy with minimal experience to see if maybe it could be kind of one of those boom or bust experiments that could hopefully propel us into the cup?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't immediately take him off the list. He definitely should still be in consideration. You look at all of like the things that are like green lights for him, where he was like handpicked by Chris Drury. We know that Drury and Gallant had their whole a little bit of a falling out throughout the playoffs this year. So just to know that our general manager and the head coach would be like more than just on good terms, like he was literally groomed for this, like you said. That's like one positive. The fact that he's young is also another positive because, despite us having a lot of older veterans, we still do have a lot of young guys as well, like the kid line. So it'd be nice to have someone who understands like the modern game, and rather than just treating it like textbook hockey, and kind of just be more like adaptable with these younger players who have more energy and like more new ideas. But then at the same time, I still do fully believe that it's very high risk, high reward, where like the Rangers have experienced this firsthand in the past, where when we first hired David Quinn, he had zero NHL experience. He didn't even have like 6 games like Knoblauch does. But I'm pretty sure David Quinn came straight from the NCAA, just straight to the Rangers. And that was horrible. He not played, but he coached really horribly. Some say he like even set the kids back a couple years when he just had them playing like 5 minutes a game down on the fourth line, really just put like a little speed hurdle in front of Lafreniere and Kakko's development a little bit. And we're kind of still dealing with the repercussions of that to this day, where they haven't fully developed yet. So it's one of those things that's like a little nervous, because we have seen it before, where if a coach comes in to our team and just has no idea what they're doing, this cup window that we're in, where, we're like last year made a huge deep playoff run. This year ended a little unfortunate, but that was really just due to Gallant and his lack of coaching abilities. So it's like, if we hire a new guy and it doesn't work, this cup window could just be immediately closed. So there's definitely a lot of safer options out there. Like all the names we mentioned in the last episode, I would probably rank a little bit higher than Knoblauch a little bit right now, but that doesn't mean that the potential isn't there. This could be one of those things where we just go out of the box, sign this guy, and it just works perfectly, where he mends well with the kids. He's able to formulate some kind of team that is able to work together and like as one cohesive unit and bring us even farther. So it really just comes down to Drury. What does Drury want? What does he envision for this team? We know that he's like a masterclass general manager, and he's put together like all of these players like day in and day out, making pretty much a super team that we won in the playoffs this year. And the coach kind of held us back. So if he's going to be one of those coaches that is going to work really well with the team, listen to advice, and actually have some sort of structured plan, then yeah, sure, go all in. It just really comes down to just like not repeating the same mistakes of the past and just having full faith in this guy, which I kind of do. He's had success in the NHL for that little stint and in the Hartford Wolfpack right now, as we've seen. So I like him.
Yeah, and here's a little tidbit from the New York Post. According to a source, Knoblauch is both a relationship builder and good with X's and O's, and is able to make the kinds of in-game adjustments the Rangers have lacked recently. So I think that's also something that we really like to hear, because the number one thing that we talked about with Gerard Gallant was a lack of adjustments. The team would kind of fall apart towards the second period or third period, and they just wouldn't be able to adjust. They would kind of just stick within their ways with Gallant, and that obviously did not end well. And then, of course, there was a lot of experience that he got when he was with, let me pull it up one more time, with the Erie Otters in the OHL. He had 4 seasons with the Otters. The team was 204, 58, 7, and 3. 0.768 points percentage and won at least 50 games each season. They were the first team in Canadian Hockey League history to post 4 consecutive 50-win seasons. Erie won the OHL championship in 2016-17 under Knoblauch's leadership. Additionally, the Otters made it to the OHL championship in the 14-15 season and won the Hamilton Spectator Trophy in recognition of having the best regular season record. Knoblauch was the recipient of the Matt Leadon Trophy in 15-16, making him OHL Coach of the Year that season. So, also continuing, during his 7 total seasons as head coach of the Kootenay Ice and Erie Otters, Knoblauch compiled a record of 298, 130, 16, and 13, and coached such players as Connor McDavid. And I think that's really the one that mainly stands out. Connor McDavid. And I know that's somebody that you were mentioning before we started recording, Eric, that he does have experience coaching Connor McDavid when he was with the Erie Otters. And so, listen, he does have the ability to navigate big circuses surrounding big time players. And we know that obviously Madison Square Garden, the Rangers superstar players that they pull in, there can be a circus at times surrounding certain players, surrounding the team in general. But I do think it's worth noting that over in the OHL, he did navigate through a circus with Connor McDavid and with a bunch of other guys. And that's something that was also listed in this New York Post article. It says his experience handling the circus around a young McDavid also sticks out, though it would pale in comparison to the bright lights of Broadway. But again, I think just the fact that he's able to push through something like that is worth noting as he potentially looks into coaching at Madison Square Garden. But Eric, what are your thoughts on that? All of the success that he had in the OHL, and then, of course, his ability to navigate the storm when there's a big media circus surrounding a singular player or surrounding the team. Do you think that should give you a higher vote of confidence, or do you think that all of that it just kind of pales in comparison to the big stage of Madison Square Garden and the New York Rangers?
I mean, I think it means a lot. That's a big thing for 2 reasons. One, just like the simple fact that he did coach Connor McDavid for a little bit right there, where like Connor McDavid, he's the best player in the world right now. That's unquestionable. And sure, like a lot of it is like his raw talent that he has, like you're the things that he does, he does on his own. But the fact that Knoblauch was a coach for him for a little bit, that definitely contributes to the type of player that he is today. So just to see that he has the potential to build superstars is like a little nice to know. We have guys like Lafreniere or Kakko who have shown a lot of potential, but haven't fully broken out of their shell yet and like fully adjusted to the NHL, despite being here for a couple of years now. It's good to know that he has that experience where he can really help players in that aspect. And then just outside of like a singular player in Connor McDavid, just overall to like have a young guy who has coached young players in like a smaller league like that. It's also a good thing because, like, sure, yeah, the NHL is completely different. It's the world's biggest stage in the world of hockey. But that's the kind of the thing I mentioned before, where it's like, sure, we have a lot of veteran players, but we also have these young guys, besides Lafreniere and Kakko. Heedle's still very young. Braden Schneider's very young. Keandre Miller's young. Fox is young. So to have a guy who is also very young and understands this new modern style of hockey where it's more fast-paced, more physical, rather than just everyone taking slap shots every day like Wayne Gretzky did throughout his entire career. It could definitely be helpful because Gerard Gallant, he was an older veteran, more seasoned coach, and he definitely had a style of coaching that was just more like by the books, like you're going to do what I tell you, and you're not really going to have that much like creative freedom on the ice right there. So it would be very nice to see a coach who is more open to that, where just like kind of have a plan no matter what, like a structured game set style of play, but also at the same time kind of just let the players go out and do their thing, where I feel like all these young guys on the team, they've been like shackled down in the bottom 6, haven't really had much power play time, much time to like really show what they're made of. So I think that's something that just based on having OHL experience, AHL experience, that it started to show through in the NHL a little bit. And like, is it risky? Yeah, it might not work. It might be just what we needed, but it's definitely a positive in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, having that relatability with some of the younger guys, but also I think having familiarity with the team. He's just over at the Wolfpack, and like we said, he was handpicked by Chris Drury. Some believe that he was being groomed by Drury and the Rangers for eventually taking an NHL position, head coaching position, maybe including the New York Rangers coaching position. And I will say the familiarity with the front office is one thing, but also with some of the players, I think is worth noting. Here's a quote from Ryan Lindgren. He said, "They're awesome," discussing Knoblauch and then Hartford assistant Gord Murphy. "I played for them a little bit in Hartford and I really enjoyed them. They're two just outstanding people and great coaches. Very easy to talk to, so smart with the game too." And again, the more I read about this guy, the more I see how good he is at in-game adjustments. That's been the main takeaway from every article on Kris Knoblauch. They all mention that he is just really good at adjusting in-game, which again, I think is something super important for the Rangers. So, Eric, before we wrap up, what are your thoughts on the fact that he does have familiarity with the players and has that in-game adjustment ability? And, how much does that weigh in your personal opinion of whether or not you think that he would be a good fit for the New York Rangers head coach?
I mean, I love that personally, where it's like, yeah, we have like a lot of our team players like Zibanejad who were like traded over here like already like at an NHL level, but a lot of the players on our team started out in Hartford, like they were drafted, played down there for a couple years, and then got called up. So to have that level of familiarity where it's like it's not an entirely new setting, it's like you're kind of like familiar with the style of play and like what the coaching staff can bring. That definitely helps as well. And the fact that he's great at making in-game adjustments, that's pretty much exactly what the Rangers need. And that's really where Gerard Gallant lacked a lot, where like, especially during the playoffs where we had our terrible, disappointing first round exit, going into every game, it was just like Gerard Gallant would just like switch two players on different lines and then just call it a day and be like, this should be enough to get us back on track. But at the start of the game, if that wasn't working, he didn't do anything, hockey is like, it's one of those sports where you can start off like really terrible and then still make an insane comeback as long as you make these adjustments. There's a reason why, outside of resting your players, that the intermissions are like over 20 minutes, is so you can go into the locker room, figure out what went wrong, and come out there and fix that. And I feel like Gerard Gallant, I don't know what he said in the locker room during all those games, but whatever it was, it didn't work. So to know that Knoblauch is one of those guys who, if we have a really terrible first period, will go into the locker room, switch up the lines, change the style of play, and then send them back out there for a fresh start. That's what we need, because there's been too many games, especially this season, where like we either started off terrible and then just went downhill the whole game, or started off well and then it went downhill the whole game. It's like, at some point you got to make these adjustments, and it's good to know that he has the ability to do that.
Yeah, I 1000% agree with that. And again, I think that his familiarity with the organization is also worth noting. It might just make him the leader in the clubhouse just because everybody knows him. Sometimes bringing in an outside voice can be a little challenging and a little bit scary, but Knoblauch having familiarity with the GM, with a bunch of the players, definitely goes a long way in the process. But it is also worth noting he is in the middle of a deep postseason run with Hartford, and that might prevent him from being able to focus on potentially taking this Rangers job. They can't interview him until he's probably done with his season, and it looks like they have a pretty good chance of going all the way and their season extending even further. So we'll see. I know that the Rangers are obviously compiling their list right now, but if they're trying to get interviews in anytime soon, they may just have to wait for Knoblauch, and I'm not sure if they're going to be able to wait too long for Knoblauch to finish out a season. So I do think that's something worth noting as well. But overall, Knoblauch, I'm pretty positive on this guy. I think that he would be a good coach. I think it would be a good fit. I think it would be a unique idea, a bold take from the coach position to go with a guy who's less experienced, but really fits a lot of needs for the Rangers. Has the ability to adjust, has the relatability and familiarity with the players and front office. So there's a lot of pros here, definitely some cons. It's a risky pick. But if they do end up picking Kris Knoblauch, I would really like it. So to answer the question of the episode, should they consider him? In my opinion, absolutely 100%. I do believe he should be in top consideration for the Rangers head coaching position. But then again, there are some other really strong candidates that we will continue to dive into right here on Fireside Rangers. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Rangers.